session. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Prazer, uma honra
It is a
estar
pleasure,
aqui.
honor to be here.
Mais do que tudo, ouvindo
More than
tudo de
anything,
interessante
listening
que
all the
tem
interesting
neste
talks
evento que está
that
na
we have at this event
fronteira
that is in the
da
front
tecnologia
line
e que é um dos
of
filhos
technology.
mais
It's
caros
one of
do
the
CGI.br.
most
Como
expensive
Wagner disse,
children of
atualmente ocupo a
CGI.br.
posição
As
de
Wagner said,
conselheiro,
I'm a board member
indicado pelo Ministério da Ciência e
appointed by
Tecnologia.
the
Mas
Ministry
vamos
of
direto ao
Science and
ponto aqui.
Technology. Let's
O
get to the
título da
point here.
exposição
The
que nos
title
fará
of this
o convidado Chaals Nevile
that Chaals Nevile
é Alimentando
will
a
give us
fera.
is
Qual a
Feeding the
importância dos
Beast.
metadados
What is the
na
importance
era do
of
machine learning?
metadata in the times of
Ele
machine
deve fazer
learning,
breve
or
panorama
the
sobre
age of machine
algum dos
learning?
grandes
He
esforços
should
para se
talk
dar
about
significado
some of the
que
great
seja
efforts give meaning
compreensível
that are understandable
por máquina para a web,
by
do
machine
Dublin
to
Core
web, of
ao
the Dublin, from Dublin
schema.org,
Core to
e como o
schema.org,
aprendizado de
and
máquina
how
afeta a
machine
decisão
learning
do que
impacts
vale
the
a pena
decision of
fazer
what
e
is
quais
worth
dados
doing
ainda
or
são
what data
valiosos.
are still valuable.
O primeiro emprego do Charles foi na
Charles'
criação de
first
sistema
job
de
was
dados há
in
muitos anos na Austrália,
data
e
systems
que hoje,
creation
segundo
for
ele
many
disse,
times in
seriam
Australia, as he
ilegais
said,
por força
would have
das
been
leis
illegal
que
due
proíbem a
to
exploração
the
de
regulation
crianças.
that prohibit
Desde então, ele
children
trabalhou em
exploitation.
muitos
Since then,
aspectos da
he's worked
web,
in many
desde a
aspects of the web,
acessibilidade a
from
servidores
accessibility to
baseados em Zoho,
servers, annotated based in Zoho, and most of his work has focused standards, including first generation of WCIG, ATG, AG, SVG, that you know much better than I, and most recent generations of HTML5 standards, XR, Enterprise Ethereum, development of things that use and may lead to standards with vocabulary of web semantics. He's worked for W3C, Web Opera browser, and the Yandex. And he's director of the technical program of Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. I'd like to give him the floor, thank him for his presence, and let's listen to what he has to tell us about megadata.
Então, feeding the beast. I have a clicker that doesn't click. Good start. Okay. So, I'm sort of following from what Leonie said. I'm glad I talked to her before she gave her talk. Otherwise, I would have said lots of things she already did. AI amplifies ingenuity and idiocy and stupidity and whatever else it learned. Intelligence is a thing that trains, that gets trained, that learns things, right? Like a child going to school. So one of the questions is, how do we send our AI to the right school? How do we make sure it actually learns useful things and not things we don't like? No, it's okay. So if you already guessed the answer, you get to stay behind and clean the blackboard. We live in the age of machine learning. We have cognitive computing, we have data science, we have all of these wonderful technological tools, and they're doing things like reading text so you can find things on the web. They're doing translation, as Leonie showed. They do voice recognition, they do image processing, and they've been working on this for a very, very long time. Back in the early 90s, I guess, or late 1980s, people were using very simple image recognition systems to provide access to computer interfaces. The way that a screen reader does it is using metadata to understand how the system works. The way that the Eureka project did it was use artificial intelligence to try and work out what the interface was on the screen and present that to the user. This was a great system. You could take a then $2,000 computer at the prices of the time, and by putting next to it about $25,000 worth of computing equipment, you could make it accessible. We can do a lot better now. It's cheaper. But we have all of these tools, we have all of these tricks, and the biggest one is there is a huge amount of data available to work on. So machines are learning. Machines keep on learning. Many people will be familiar with going to some service and you get a question saying, before I let you do anything, please tell me which of these pictures are pictures of room numbers, or robots, or mountains, or shops, or endangered animals, or terrorists, or people who disagree with the government, or whatever it is that the people behind the system are trying to teach their AI to recognize. We have traffic systems, we have information that's coming in and going out all the time. And machines are learning, machines love metadata. It's what they use, right? They collect all of this information. I did 20,000 translations. Which are the ones that people liked? That's metadata, right? I need information to find the important piece of content on this great big page of text. A very, very famous piece of metadata is called page rank. Right? That's just metadata. It's created automatically, but it's critical to commerce today, and it's metadata. Metadata is about vocabularies, it's about information, and it's about technology. And the metadata I'm going to talk most about is the stuff that we, as people, put online, put into the web, put into the universe. What are the useful things we can do? What actually helps us? Does anyone recognize this image? For those who can't see it, it's a piece of paper. Right up at the top is a handwritten note saying vague but exciting. And then there's an author's name, Tim Berners-Lee. See, there's a piece of metadata. There's a title, information management, a proposal. Does anyone know what this is? A couple of people. This is the document that Tim Berners-Lee gave to his boss and said, here is a description of an information system I want to make. I think it will be very helpful for CERN, where he worked. It's going to be called the World Wide Web. And it turns out it was quite successful. If you look at the big diagram that takes up most of the front page, this is what all metadata diagrams look like. It's little things connected to other little things with arrows and labels. It's where we started out when Tim was trying to figure out how you build the web. It's where the web has always been. So why, obviously, the question is always, why do we do this? Why do we have metadata? Why does anybody ever create this extra information and put it anywhere? There are a large variety of reasons, nearly all of which are SEO, search engine optimization. Everybody thinks, if I do the right thing, I'm going to get found in Google, and that will make me successful, famous, and happy, because those things go together. I don't know about search engines. Search optimization, this is the whole point of all of this data. Right? Does anyone remember the Dewey Decimal System for classifying books? If you go to my school library back in the dark ages of history, you find that all the books have a little sticker on the back, and there's a number. And that number is a magic code that helps me find the information I want, right? It's all about search optimization. It's finding the information in the library. And so when the web came along, and started really taking off, people said, well, how are we going to find our way around? And in the early web, it was really easy. You would go to somebody's directory of all of the websites, and you hope they updated it this week, because there were like 12 new websites this week, and someone would add those 12 onto a page, and you could look at the list and see what there was. By the time the page got to 100 million lines, that was not going to work. And so people said, yeah, we need a way of finding things that's a bit more efficient. And what do we want to find? We want to find information. We want to know about the history of things. Where did this stuff come from? Who made it? Is it true? Was it useful? Do we still care about it? Does anyone need it? All of these things are, what is this stuff worth? And there's a lot more. So, a quick tour of history. Does anyone remember PICs? In a web page in 1996 or 7 or 8, people would put this strange-looking code I have in their HTML web page, and they would do that to say, this is not pornography. That was the whole purpose of commercial deployment of this data, because the web started exploding with pornography, and teachers and parents and government officials in education departments started getting very upset about whether or not students should be able to use the web. There was this wonderful resource full of exciting new information they couldn't get at the library or anywhere else. It was up to date, it was fantastic, and it was full of stuff that they couldn't justify showing to school kids. So they could either try and set up a censorship system and just shut things down, and a lot of work has gone into that. People still do that. It's still how a lot of child pornography is suppressed. It's actually automatically just kicked out of the web in many countries around the world. But being able to label what there is made a better solution for 2 reasons. One, because it meant that you could work out what it was that you were happy to show. If you take an airplane and you watch a movie, you will see sometimes this movie has been modified. Content has been adjusted. Certainly in the 90s, if you took a Qantas flight from Melbourne to Los Angeles and watched some movie, and then took a United Airlines flight back and watched the same movie, you would be watching 2 different things. Because Australian culture, society, law censors out a lot more violence than Americans do, and leaves in a lot more sex and bad language than Americans do. So it was important to actually be able to give people the tools to work with the way they wanted to understand information. A more advanced system, the Dublin Core, was created by librarians, saying, here we're going to give descriptions of stuff, and these examples are pretty stupid. The creator of this talk, by about 1999, metadata was mostly about getting stuff into search engines. It was very largely about spam. There was just masses of junk being put in so that whatever my web page is about is going to be found as the first hit for everything. And so machines, which learned from metadata, learned about metadata. And actually, usually their programmers learned about metadata. The machine would run and the programmers would see what it was doing as it was learning. So we discovered that the web was full of spam data, full of outdated junk. A web page which had been updated 46 times for what it says. I don't know, say the calendar for your school events. In 2001, the calendar's got all of the events for 2000, but the metadata says school events for 1997, because no one ever changed it. Or they put the same stuff across every single page just so it couldn't go out of date. It was accurate and entirely useless. Basically, what did the machines learn? They learned that people are telling us lies. Who'd have thought people lie to computers? And so there was a period where metadata became very, very unfashionable. Nobody bothered putting it in their website anymore because no search engine would actually do anything visible with it. Search engines still process it. They just sit on the web and they crawl around eating text, eating pictures, whatever content they find, they stick it in their massively growing piles of disk drives and run whatever analysis they can think of to learn. But they didn't show anyone that they were doing that. So in the shadows, this was being done. Where you couldn't see it, big data and AI, because data was exploding, exponentially growing. Every year you got more data than you'd ever had before altogether. And then the next year, all of that total was only a fraction of what we produced the next year. In the meantime, people went off and worked on how do you do metadata for real? How do information scientists think about producing metadata? Ontologists and people who are quite clever. And we sort of got two different pathways to make metadata useful. One, librarians or ontologists or serious information managers who said, well, we just need high quality information. We want stuff that is reliable. We want stuff that comes from an authority, from someone who knows what they're doing, from someone who's in a position to say this is true or accurate or judged to be acceptable for children. And the other approach was the scruffies, the people who said, I don't know exactly what we want, but I've got this little tiny thing and it sort of kind of works. I can make something work a little bit better by adding just this little bit of stuff. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with friend of a friend. It's a metadata vocabulary. It was made by a guy who's sometimes thought of as a very important, impressive information scientist, and sometimes thought of as a sort of scruffy guy who just makes stuff up and sees if it works. It was a way of putting information onto your website about you and about the people you knew and about the languages you spoke and a few other things about relationships. Because in 2000, that seemed like that'd be really interesting. And a bunch of people played around with it, and there were maps of people who were connected up. There's a t-shirt which has the entire collection of people known to have a faux profile. And Dan Brickley, who made the thing up with Libby Miller, are in the middle. Aaron Swartz, who's a well-known name, but was then a 14-year-old kid who happened to have talked to a couple of people, who was on the t-shirt. And I was like, look, we've got this whole map of people who are connected. And then a few years later, things like Facebook and MySpace came along and produced these kind of maps, but with millions and millions of people and much more information about them and slightly different motivations on how to use it. So I think of these two approaches as wet or dry. Right? Lots and lots of people who are big names in the HTML world talk about dry all the time. They think that that's the way that you want to do metadata stuff, and they have some very good reasons for it. Dry means don't repeat yourself. Right? And the reason is, if you have some information in 3 different places, you are going to forget to change the 3rd one, especially if it's invisible. If you have your information scattered around 4 different parts of your code, and you try and pick some stuff up and put it onto a new page, new system, new application, you'll lose a bit that's important. We know this happens because the web is full of it. There is masses of proof that this problem occurs all the time from people who are actually smart and working hard. So ideas like microformats, RDFA, which are ways of putting information in pages, schema.org, which is an actual vocabulary, have a very strong base in this philosophy, in this idea of don't repeat yourself, make everything a single source of truth. In the document, which is my slides, this HTML page, I have data which I can't break it, right? If I copy my slides out to change the text and produce new slides, it's pretty likely that you'll find there's a slide from an old presentation that accidentally got, or a line from an old presentation that accidentally stayed in the new presentation. But if I update my title automatically updates its metadata, because there is only one place where it goes. If I change my name, and it might seem silly, but I have done that, then I can get my updated information. The wet approach is what I think of. It's where you have real workflows, where you actually have experts. So a big piece of the thinking behind the dry approach is ordinary people are building content. Web developers go to school or sit in their bedroom and learn about CSS and JavaScript and accessibility, maybe, and privacy, probably not, and information architecture, not much, because those classes are boring, and metadata systems, again, those classes are a good time to go away and have a beer, because you only need to pass 80% to get through your degree, right? Making systems that non-experts can use properly, that's really valuable. And this is what we use AI for, right? We have the expertise in the computer so that the human can do things that are not stupid because they don't make mistakes. But we also have experts. We have human experts, people who know what they're talking about. We have open source, weekend projects that people are trying to build, and we have big companies with expensive managers telling people exactly how they need to work and checking that they work exactly that way. And those are good for something. Those are good for actually saying, we don't need a process designed to be idiot-proof because we're not using it with idiots. We have experts here. We're going to use those experts. We're going to use their expertise. And instead of having very basic low-quality data going in, which means we only get very basic information coming out, we're going to put high-quality stuff in. We're going to put in information that relies on tools and relies on experts to be right. both of those approaches exist in the real world because, well, it turns out that that's how the world is. This is the same metadata as I showed, but this metadata, instead of being in my slides, is something I have to update every single time. It uses JSON-LD, which is a format. It looks about the same. I want to show one reason why I might do this, though. Let's see if the internet... No, the internet doesn't work. All right, I'm going to tell you about it. New tab. Schema.org. Page, creative work. Just imagine I'm a screen reader, right? If you look at examples of, just at schema.org, of how you use the data, when you have your name and your title, when you have an event listing, and you know what the event is, it's got a name, it's got a title, it's got a date and a place, it's pretty easy to use the dry approach. You just wrap some microdata or some RDFA or something around it, the same as I showed in my previous example, and you're done. Except if you want to talk about an event, I don't know, the presentation by some crazy Australian guy about metadata in the Congress Centre on the 5th of October, you might have about 3 lines of text or 4 lines of text. And you might have 4 pages of information you want to put into the metadata. You actually want to put right into your metadata the fact that the guy came from Australia, used to speak in Portuguese, doesn't know anything, lost his hat, left his computer on the plane, more information about the talk. That doesn't work in the dry approach, right? If you're not putting it all there, then you're stuck with an approach like this. Because the world is not binary choices, right? It's not like you have to have this or that. It's not that there is one true way either. It's not right or wrong. So modern metadata relies on one very valuable advance in technology. How many people get spam in their email? There are a few. Who knew? Actually, you get a bit of spam. So much spam is now automatically filtered out by magic because automatic spam filtering is so good that people are happy to put it into production systems. Email that never ever gets to you because your email service just threw it away. They're like, nah, that is so obviously spam that we're not sending it through. It's true that I have an email address which ends in yandex.ru, and there are some fairly large email systems that just throw away all my email. Even for people who are writing to me as professional colleagues, they can't get my replies. But that's a very minor part of it. Most of the time it works. Which means, because we can detect spam, we can detect the sort of junk metadata that we used to have 18 years ago, and so we can pick out the good stuff. And modern metadata is actually incredibly useful. We're back at the stage where we can use what you put on your web page to drive user interfaces, to put into search page results, to put into your email system directly. We can use that and we can compare good quality information to things that look the same. Because AI is really a lot about pattern matching. If we can find things where we trust the metadata and the metadata tells us something useful about it, the things that look similar, we rely on that good metadata, whether it's stuff that was put into the web or whether it's stuff that we generated automatically like PageRank, to decide that, yeah, that stuff must be good too. So What kind of metadata should you use? You should use metadata that helps machines to help you. Use information that helps you solve your problems. It might be that you just want a little bit of microformats, some simple stuff about your recipes. It might be that you are a television producer and you have a staff who have lots of expertise, lots of knowledge, and can put really high quality information into the web to go along with your TV shows or the descriptions of your TV shows. One final comment, data modeling, figuring out how you describe information, turns out to be really hard. So I recommend, if you find someone else's approach and that works, do it that way. It will save you a lot of pain. Muito obrigado. Temos uns minutos.
Oi, Chaals, tudo bem? Obrigado pela apresentação. Gostei muito. Eu particularmente trabalho bastante com metadados.
Work a lot with metadata. I'm Nilsson from Ceweb.br as well. I have a question maybe to direct. I like the approach you called scruffy or dry or the dumb briefing with the schema.org. But I see that schema.org, all the metadata we put in, end up being more useful for Google itself to use within their own products. What can we use still based on those lighter vocabulary schema.org and other products? How useful is this for a model of machine learning?
So how useful is it for machine learning? I mean, the reason why Google actually processes the schema.org and why they pay somebody, pay several people to make the system and keep on working out how to improve it, is because it feeds their own machine learning systems, right? That's their purpose for it. And so they love having that data. They want, this is what Google does, right? They want more data, that's their job. And the more data they have, the better they can use it. And basically the company's built on the idea that if we build better programming systems, we can better organize that data. So they use the metadata to feed what they can do and produce their products. How can we use it? Well, I think the number one selling point for schema.org, possibly partly mistakenly, is search engine optimization. Everybody wants their hotel or fishing tours or cat photo to come up at the top of the web page when someone searches. But we actually use metadata for a whole lot of other stuff, right? You use it for management of your own information. And you can do that in two ways. You can actually build your own management systems. You can use your content management system, your data processing internal to your organization or your business or your fishing club. And you track the things that are important to you. There's another way you can do that, which is something people like the Bibliothèque Nationale de la France, the National Library of France, very proud, very nationalist cultural institution. They say, we have a catalog system. We invest good money and we have very good French engineers building a very French catalog system that works very, very well. And the vast majority of people who come to our catalog end up direct at the result page they wanted because they used Google's searching instead of our searching. Is it better to have your own searching? Is it better to say, no, we don't need our own searching? If you're the French National Library, I think their thinking is, we're going to have our own searching because whatever some company in the US does, it's great when it works. It's critical to us that our own national heritage is managed by our own tools and that we can walk away from this system which is currently freely available and wonderful but has no guarantees and might fall over. So how do you use the data? This depends on what you actually want to do with it. But how do you think about it? I think it's important to think about what are you going to do with it? When are you going to need it? Because most metadata, you don't need it when you make it. It's not there for when you make it. It's there for 5 years later when you've forgotten what it was about and need to check it.
Chaals,
Chaals, W3C. My name is Wagner, and I'm also from Ceweb and NIC.br. W3C created, set up a group, a community group that aims at investigating the possibilities of generating some kind of information for web users, whether the information they are searching or checking is reliable or not. This group is called Web Credibility. Well, my question, I personally think it's one of the most difficult tasks for you to find indicators that could actually ensure that the information you're looking at is safe and reliable or not. But anyhow, my question to you is whether you think that metadata could be an instrument of information on reliability of data on the web. See?
Okay, thank you.
The answer is yes. Metadata, I'm assuming I understood the question because I had to hear it from you direct. Yes, metadata is a way of describing whether information is trustworthy and reliable. Is this information trustworthy? Whatever you say about that is metadata, right? So is your metadata itself trustworthy and reliable? That's where you get back into the problems which the community group actually has to solve. And so the trace of where did that information come from, the trace of why was it said to be credible, that's a technology problem that goes, if you like, outside metadata. The metadata problem itself is we want to be able to collect statements about a document, say, and we want a way of describing things about that document. We need a vocabulary, we need a technology where we can query and record that information. And then we want a verification framework. In that case, you say maybe we want a blockchain. Right? We want something where you can't fake the fact that Wagner said, Chaals knows what he's talking about. So in 20 years, when people say, hey, Wagner, you said Chaals was intelligent, you can't deny that you did that. You can just say, I was wrong. And so, the metadata about credibility, that's really important. I mean, that's what fact checkers do. Right? All these people who go out and fact check news, they're producing that kind of metadata. How do you decide whether to trust a particular fact checker? This is one of those turtles all the way down problems. Once you get to the bottom turtle, you just decide.
I agree.
Another question. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your talk. I study library studies, and I usually more on the side of cataloging, more strict things. A question I have. Can you hear me, Chaals? If you think about a person that's trying to retrieve information, not in the field of books, but actually web contents, what do you think is best? Metadata or cataloging, or things can move hand in hand so that you have more complete?
Yeah, that's a really hard problem. What's best is good user interfaces. And when you get to search, good user interface actually includes language. How do how do you ask the questions and how do you understand what people mean when they say, you know, find me a presentation, you know, find me about fishing. It's like, Alexa, tell me about fishing. Ooh, you want to go to this page over there and give it your credit card number. Oh no, you actually just want to get a rod and a hook and catch fish. Right? Disambiguation, the sort of problems that... So metadata can solve the problem of what kind of... And not fishing, because in English you use different spelling. But there are lots of things where you have ambiguity in the question. An example, I was looking for something about sad computers, and you know, search systems had no idea about the question I was asking. I went to several search engines, and I had to think very hard about how I ask this question, because there's so much of the wrong information. Not incorrect, but not the information I'm looking for. It's about a different topic. You need, in order to make those problems go away, in order to minimize those problems, you need a search system. You need data behind it. It needs to be able to find results. But actually one of the key things is you need an interface that lets the person and helps the person say, yeah, you misunderstood my question. And one of the things that's missing in most search interfaces today is, no, that wasn't what I meant. Try again and think about it different. Because the technology underlying a search engine, they know that there are 5 or 6 or 7 different interpretations. But, because they cut their interface down to one little box, they don't bother asking, is this the one you meant? They might do something like personalization, something like A/B testing, where they put up 2 different results. And there used to be more of a case where you could say, I want more things like this. So if your first 10 results are actually all different, you can say, give me 10 things like this, or give me 10 things like that. Those sort of problems, they're partly about cataloging. They're a lot about human-computer interaction.
Thank you.
Eu não sou da área tecnológica pura, mas eu advogo.
Sector, but I advocate technology. Today we're going through our elections period that is quite fierce, almost violent in terms of divergence, and electoral justice that controls campaigns faces great problems of fake news, and they find the use of fake, distorted mega data. Is there anything that can be done to help or avoid this problem, some ethics, some rule with the use, misconduct of...
Yeah, people having ethics and following rules, that would be a big help. There are things that you can do. There are technical things that you can do. The same kind of technology that finds spam that can be used to find a certain amount of fake stuff. There are things that you can do, like looking for information that's in an echo chamber. One of the big things people talk about is the fact that information now is siloed into communities who only listen to themselves. So you can figure out, because there's lots of information about people and what they're seeing and what they're reading, as well as what they're producing. You can figure out what circle this information is being repeated in. And you can use that kind of process to say, hey, wait a minute. This information is not generally recognized as true. It's recognized as true by people who are looking for information with a particular bias. And so there's a lot of things that are generally recognized as true. It's humid in São Paulo. And there are things where only one group of people thinks it's true, like there is no better food than picanha, or there is no better beer than Pacifico, Modelo, whatever your particular thing is. Finding the stuff that only gets traction in one circle, that has potential value as a strategy. The basic problem, though, is this is about human judgment. This is about judgment of values, in the same way that elections are about judgment of values. You can make the system as good as you can in order to allow what the people actually said to be the result. But people say all kinds of things, because they believe all kinds of things and they think all kinds of things. Can we use metadata to stop them thinking wrongly? Probably not, and I very sincerely hope not. I mean, there are lots of countries that have tried to do that very hard, and I think generally with extremely bad results. I live in Spain, which doesn't have a great history of tolerance for people whose ideas differed from other people's ideas. I think, fortunately, no, we can't actually stop those things from occurring. We can identify them and we can give ourselves the tools to choose what to read and what to understand by giving it more contextual information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. It's been quite interesting. So we're closing our morning session. We'll be back at 2:30, okay? Thank you all very much. Thanks.